All right. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Tuesday, January 26th meeting of the Carrboro Town Council. First, we'll start off taking our roll call. Kathy? She's like, ah.
Sorry, I lost my screen there. I couldn't unmute myself. Okay. Hey, y'all, just say present when I call your name, please. Mayor Lydia Lavelle.
Present.
Councilmember Barbara Fouchie.
Present.
Councilmember Jacqueline Gist.
Present.
Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell.
Present.
Councilmember Susan Romaine.
Present.
Councilmember Damon Siles.
Present.
And Councilmember Sammy Slade.
Present.
All right, great. Thank y'all. So we'll start off our meeting as we start off every meeting with a poetry reading by our poet laureate.
Not seeing Mr. Joyner present just yet. Yep, there he is. He just came over.
All right, we'll get Fred Joyner to join us.
Hello, everyone.
Good evening.
How y'all doing? Sorry, I was a little bit late. Happy Tuesday.
Yeah.
So just recently, I think it was last week, the retired baseball player and philanthropist Henry Hank Allen passed away, and so Kevin Young, the poet and director now of the National Museum of African American History and Culture in DC, wrote this book called Brown, and in it there's a poem called "Open Letter to Hank Aaron," and so I wanted to read that just to mark Hank Aaron, Mr. Aaron's life, and the work that he not only did with his body, but the work that he did as an activist and an advocate for higher education and for HBCUs and for equality and equity. He's a statesman far beyond his athletic accolades. Open letter to Hank Aaron. Your folded jersey said it best. Brave. A bounty on your head, last name a prophet. First a king, you kept swinging that hammer. Bad Henry. Even after the threats fell like hail. Every barbershop's expert already knew you would best Ruth's sacred record. Just like they knew the babe was really black. Ever see that nose of his? The hate mail you kept opening, kept coming. Scrawled and sutured, brushing your back more than Hoot Gibson inside pitch. No return address. The newspaper with your obit already written. Primed to run. Still, you swung. Like a boxer in the late rounds, hoping to change the judge's mind. Once you connect and the ball barely sails over the short porch in the left, you don't so much run as pace. Around the bases, nonchalant, nervous. A man with too much cash, worrying in his pockets. A windfall he may never live long enough to spend. Running second, two guys race up to you, friend or foe, clapping you on the back. I hear they're doctors now, as if you'd just been born, hopping the fence like that ball did. Your mama bear hugs you, headed home. Think of it as money. The bank card billboard you cleared in left field says, not that you did after the microphones aimed at your face, like arrows into a saint. Your faceless belief, then relief, I just thank God, you say, it's over with. Falling back into the crowd unharmed, you wave your blue arms. Yeah, so it's a really cool book of poems by Kevin Young. It's called Brown. A note about that poem, I don't know if you know that the history of Hank, but or of Mr. Aaron, is that his mom said after when he was when he hit the home run that broke Babe Ruth's record, his mother, he had gotten so many death threats that said if he crossed the base, they were going to kill him. They were going to shoot him. And so his mother ran out and hugged him to shield him. And when she was asked about it, she said, yeah, if they were going to get you, they were going to get me first.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just the power of a Black mother's love that I think is just, bro, I started crying the first time I heard that note after I read this poem. So anyway, I'm sorry to go beyond my minute, but I just wanted to, because that is a significant moment in the poem. So
yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot, Fred.
Thank you.
I think you know this, but I'm a huge baseball fan. It had been since I was a little girl. And I remember watching him hit 714 off of Jack Billingham of the Cincinnati Reds.
Yeah.
And then he hit 715, and those guys ran around him at second base. I mean, I can picture it like it was yesterday. So,
yeah.
He was great. He was great to watch. Thank you for remembering him.
Absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of what you alluded to, also like Hammer and Hank, and just, like there were a lot of kind of words in that poem.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Kevin Young is a master. He's a master. Yeah. So, well, thank you for your time. Thank you.
All right. Okay, that was awesome. All right, folks. So we're moving on here to resolutions, proclamations. And so we have a proclamation honoring Chief Horton. Kathy, is Chief in the waiting room?
Yeah, he should be coming over right now.
Hey. All right, so this is a proclamation that I'm issuing, and the title of it is Police Chief Walter Horton Day. Whereas Police Chief Walter Horton, a native son of Carrboro and loving son of Walter and Dorothy Horton, is quickly approaching his retirement with the town of Carrboro. And whereas Chief Horton was first sworn in as a Carrboro police officer on September 9, 1993, and promoted to lieutenant in 2009 and to captain in 2011, and after a nationwide search for a chief, selected and sworn in as police chief for the town of Carrboro in 2013. And whereas the efficiency and effectiveness of local government operation depends on the capability and reliability of skilled employees in many essential areas, especially in public safety, and the professionalism and responsiveness of public safety officers and the execution of their responsibilities of protecting the health, safety, and welfare of Carrboro's citizens are critical. And whereas the care, dedication, and community-oriented policing efforts displayed by Carrboro's police department are a direct reflection of its leader, the one who knows the way, goes the way, and shows the way to others. And whereas for 27 years, Chief Horton dedicated himself daily, working many nights and missing many family events to provide the highest standards of professionalism, excellence, and integrity as a member of the town of Carrboro Police Department. And whereas Chief Horton will retire from the town on February 1, 2021, and will be greatly missed. And whereas following our personal comments, Mayor Lavelle would like to share that she solicited from council members about or for Chief Horton. Council member Jacqueline Gist. Chief Horton is a true son of Carrboro and personifies the values we strive to uphold. During an era when police brutality and abuse of power has been in the forefront nationally, Chief Horton's commitment to ensuring that the Carrboro Police Force conducts their work in a manner that respects the humanity and dignity of each member of our community is his parting gift to Carrboro. Councilmember Randy Haven O'Donnell. Chief Horton, your authentic, caring, dedication, and service to your and our community has been outstanding. I especially want to thank you for working closely with us on development, launch, and advisement of the El Centro Casa for Employment and Leadership. Your quiet, understated nature, true attentiveness, listening, and understanding provided solid anchoring, undergirding our sense of community safety. Councilmember Sammy Slade. Thank you, Chief, for your part in responding and striving to extricate our institutions and system from racism. We are now on a better path towards a more equitable world that is rooted in love. Councilmember Damon Siles. Captain Walter Horton became Police Chief Walter Horton just 5 months after I joined the town council. From the start, Chief Horton was a welcoming and reliable ambassador for the town and his department as we settled into our new roles, even as I welcomed him to his role with a survey on cell phone location tracking from the ACLU of North Carolina. Chief Horton has been a responsive department head, a caring community leader, and a strong advocate for the officers and other employees of the police department. He is one of the local government leaders from whom I have learned the most, and I will miss him. Councilmember Barbara Fouché. Chief Horton has a kind and caring spirit. He always advocates for his department's best interests. He is super responsive when reached out to, knowledgeable in the job, and respected in the county. Councilmember Susan Romaine. If I were to pick just one quality of Chief Horton that stands out to me, it would be his calm, reassuring presence. That quality has served our town well during tumultuous times that have included calls for defunding and reforming our police department, protests and counter-protests around Black Lives Matter, and ICE's aggressive crackdowns spurring widespread fear in our immigrant communities. Now therefore be it resolved that I, Lydia Lavelle, Mayor of Carrboro, North Carolina, do hereby proclaim Monday, February 1st, the first day of his retirement, as Police Chief Walter Horton Day in the town of Carrboro. In doing so, I want to offer my thanks and appreciation to Chief Horton for his 27-year career with the town of Carrboro, for the leadership, service, and protection we have received from him during this time, and best wishes for many years of joy and retirement. This, the 26th day of January, 2021.
Woo!
Thank you. Thank you so
Awesome,
much.
Chief. All right, we're gonna miss you.
Thank you. I just appreciate all y'all support over the years.
All right, very good. Well, enjoy your last week, I guess. So.
Look at him smiling though. I don't even know. Come on, Chief. I know, right? I'd be smiling too. Bye, everybody.
All right.
Thank y'all so much.
I've solicited comments from everyone, so we could go through it in an orderly manner there. I don't know if anyone wants to just, say a closing comment or not. Was that good or anything? So.
Don't be a stranger, Walter. We want to see you at our festivals.
You won't see him again after the night. After February 1st, he'll be incognito.
Well, I was just going to say that Chief Horton, because of the pandemic, I don't feel like I really had a chance to get to know you as much as I wish I had. And but we did have our only in-person meeting, actually, was when I had an orientation with you. But this is all to say that you still owe me a cup of coffee with a cop. So if you don't come to Carrboro, I'll come to you.
You meet up at Johnny's.
There you go.
What Present Day Cafe is now?
Right. There you go. All right. Anyone else? Are we good? Thank you again so much, Steve.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate you.
Thank you, Walter. Woo!
Deuces, take care. It's gonna be good.
Bye. All right. All right, y'all. Moving on, acknowledgements. Let me turn it over to Damon for a minute to talk about something we did today, I guess.
Oh, I forgot I was going to do this, Lydia. Thank you.
Okay.
Hold on one second. I just wanted to very quickly take 30 seconds and acknowledge that there was an event this morning actually with town staff who have been participating in our Government Alliance for Race and Equity team here in Carrboro. And they presented, along with the cohort of other local governments in North Carolina that they've been working with over the past, many, many months or longer, really longer than that, as a core member of the coalition. They did a final symposium today. They gave a presentation, and on behalf of Carrboro today, Lieutenant Jim Walker from our police department and Laura Janaway from planning gave a presentation to the rest of the cohort and all the rest of us who were able to attend today. It was really great to see them coming together. I just wanted to express some appreciation for them, as well as all the other team members from the staff who were there today, including Anita Jones-McNair, who's been leading up those efforts. And really just wanted to say thanks to them and acknowledge them publicly because of the work that they're doing, and make sure that we all understand that we need to be continuing to give them the resources and support they need to continue that important work on behalf of the town. So thanks to them.
Thanks, Damon, for those comments about that event today. What really struck me, y'all, was there were like over 100 people there. You know, a lot from Carrboro, but Orange County and Greensboro and Durham and elsewhere. But you know, I did find them a lot of times they would say something. They would say, we really need to make sure our elected officials understand this or are aware of this or get what we're doing. And I feel like we have really good synergy with our staff, Mr. Manager, around GARE. But it was really instructive to kind of see that as much as we think about how we want staff to follow through on GARE, they talked as much about that relationship with us. And it was really fascinating. And just real quick, Barbara, I'll get to you. The certificate of participations, they each get one. They're going to get mailed one for participating in this. It was a 2-year learning year. It's supposed to be a year. It ended up being 2 years. Your work to transform government and create a more inclusive, effective democracy is an inspiration. So really cool kind of sign off of the program today. Barbara?
Yeah, so I was listening in this morning and was really struck by the truth telling, from the panelists as far as what our charge is going forward. And I think this is a time for truth telling. And I appreciated that from some of the panelists from places, I think, like Charlotte, maybe Durham, and a few other municipalities. So, we just got to get our ducks in a row. And municipalities that are participating, we need to get ready to receive this. It's not a magic bullet, and it's going to take all of us working together, for GARE to work the way that we want it to, and for us to get the desired results. So I was happy to be able to listen in, for a couple hours this morning.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And, part of the graduation was, don't just put it away. Now you got to implement. So it was really awesome, y'all. All right. So then next on the agenda, announcement of upcoming meetings.
Right. The next time that y'all meet, it will be February. The calendar jumped ahead. We won't be skipping a whole month, but you'll meet February 2nd. And between now and next week, the only meeting that I'm showing is the community food distribution that's scheduled for January 28th. That's going to be at Carrboro High School, running from 9:30 a.m. until 11 a.m. And then we'll have the South Greensboro Street Sidewalk public meeting. That's January 28th at from 7:30 to 9:30. And please contact Tina Moon at cmoon@townofcarboro.org if you'd like to attend that. And I'm sorry, this calendar is.
And I think that's on Thursday and on Saturday.
That's the meeting that's showing on Saturday. That's right, Mayor. The South Greensboro Street Sidewalk public meeting on Saturday will be from 11 a.m. until 1 a.m. Same contact Tina Moon at cmoon@townofcarboro.org.
Okay. Anyone else want to add in something else? I saw Damon and then Barbara.
I guess since the reminder that February is soon, February 1st is Monday, and the town is going to be starting off their Black History Month programming with an event commemorating Congressman George Henry White. So there's some press going around about that from our public information officer. It'd be good to attend. It's going to be a great way to kick off that series of events from our Recreation and Parks program.
Awesome. Thank you, Damon. Barbara?
Yeah. So February 1st is Black History Month, but we all know Black History Month is every month. That's just the month that's designated in the calendar. So Friday, I think it's the annual chamber meeting. And I think Thursday, there is a presentation from the Haggerty Consulting Group about the long-term recovery efforts. There's some kind of presentation at 6. David, do you have the information? Am I on the right date?
Yeah, I think you're right. The Orange County, part of the recovery program, the
Yeah.
folks that were involved with the Orange County plan. It's an open meeting. I think it's like 6 o'clock or something.
Right. Thank you, Lydia.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Kathy or Rebecca or David might have the, but it's I know there's a link we got that we could join it and learn more about it, I guess.
Yeah, thanks, Lydia.
That link be resent to us?
Sure.
Thanks, Kathy. Yeah, I've been having email trouble, so if you could resend the link to that. Thank you.
All right, very good. All right, y'all. Let's see. So next, we don't have any speakers from the floor. And so then we move on here to consent agenda. Mr. Manager.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, good evening. There are 9 items on your consent agenda. The first item is approval of the meeting minutes from November 10th, December the 1st, and January the 12th. And we have Randy Haven O'Donnell has offered amendments for November 12th, December the 1st, and January the 12th. And then for January the 12th, also amendments from Councilmember Romaine, Slade, and Siles. The second item on your agenda is a resolution to award the service sidearm to retiring Police Chief Walter Horton. The third item would amend the capital improvement ordinance and allocate $310,000 for the Robert Street Improvement Project. The fourth item would, this is great news, would allow us to accept the $900,000 grant for emergency housing assistance from HUD. Fantastic. The fifth item is a recommendation from the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee for Community Home Trust, as well as the Alliance for AIDS Services. The sixth item would allocate an additional $44,000 to the East Main Street restriping project for signal plans. The seventh item is an affordable housing update. The eighth item would is a conditional use permit, sets a public hearing for a CUP for 721 Jones Ferry Road. That public hearing would be March 2, 2021. And the final item on your agenda would set a public hearing for the conditional use permit for the Art Center, and that would be February the 23rd. Mayor.
Okay. All right. Anyone want to make a motion? Or
I move the whole consent agenda. What is it, 1 through 9?
it is 1 through 9. Yes.
Yes.
Second by Jackie. Motion by Barbara, second by Jackie. All in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
And Jackie?
Aye.
All right. Awesome. Mr. Manager, we're ahead of schedule. Other
All
matters?
right. We're off. Good. Okay, so under other matters, the first item is a request to set a public hearing for a text amendment to the land use ordinance relating to stormwater management requirements. And someone from planning is going to introduce that. I'm not sure if it's Tina, Marty, or Trish. Planning.
They're on their way over.
Okay.
Good evening, everyone. We have just a little bit of new information from correspondence with the applicant from Friday. So if you don't mind, I'll do just a short presentation and then we'll be happy to answer any questions. So I'll go ahead and share my screen now.
Tina, I pulled the applicant over. Should they be here now or should I bring them over after you're finished?
Let's see if they have something to add. It may be that we're able to cover everything without additional comments. So again, thank you and good evening. As you know from your packet, the town has received an application from Dan Jewell with Culture Jewels Thames on behalf of the Arts Commission, or pardon me, the Arts Center, an application for a text amendment related to the stormwater management regulations to add a new provision under 15-263G. Two draft ordinances were prepared and included in your packet, option A and B. You've probably looked through this, but just for a quick review, option A allows the permit issuing authority the opportunity to approve projects that meet certain public benefit parameters with the slow release of stormwater rather than meeting our traditional volume control provisions. Option B also allows the approval of a project with similar public type benefits, but it still requires calculation of the annual stormwater volume reduction. It simply allows a project to move forward with a lesser standard, meeting a lesser standard. In other words, a higher amount of annual stormwater runoff. The applicant has expressed a preference with moving forward with option B with some edits. And so I'm going to show you those edits right now on the screen. So give you a chance to look at them. The way staff reads this, eligibility for this new provision 4 would require that the applicant demonstrate that they have in fact calculated the extent to which that they've tried all of the different stormwater management design approaches and that they simply can't meet the standard. So in terms of a housekeeping matter, there we go. From a housekeeping matter, the resolution that was in your packet as attachment A identified two options for you to move forward, either with option A, the option A ordinance or the option B ordinance. So if you decide you would like to move forward with option B, or as always, your choice, something else, if you just be clear with that when you make your motion. So I'll stop there and I'll go back up to the slide with the language. And if Dan would like to speak, I'll stop and give him that opportunity.
Okay, thank you, Tina. Jackie, do you want this answer before we hear from Dan?
No, I'll go ahead and hear from Dan, and then I have a comment about it.
Okay, all right. Dan, hi, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Council, Mr. Manager. I am Dan Jewell with Culture Jewel Thames. We're a civil engineering and landscape architecture firm. We are assisting the Arts Center with the design in pursuit of approvals for a new home for them on Jones Ferry Road. Also in attendance this evening are folks with the Arts Center, the development team, and our design team. The Arts Center has been in Carrboro for over 40 years, and they would very much like to stay here for another 40 years. To this end, they've been working for over 2 years to identify a suitable site to build their future home and entered into a contract to purchase this site on Jones Ferry Road approximately 18 months ago after doing an exhaustive search of possible properties in Carrboro. What we have discovered after many months of effort in design and analysis is that this is a very challenged piece of property and that we cannot meet the stormwater management expectations imposed by a strict interpretation of section 15-263G of the LUO. Absent some measure of relief from this, the project cannot move forward, and the Arts Center will need to be looking for alternative sites, quite possibly outside of Carrboro. Therefore, we've been working with your staff to craft an amendment that provides a very narrowly focused and tailored exception to the LUO that is designed to provide flexibility to make possible a worthy development such as this that has numerous community benefits and then can still serve the spirit of the ordinance while allowing the project to move ahead. We very much appreciate being given the opportunity to speak. We look forward to continuing to work with you and staff as we prepare for the public hearing that we hope you will set. And as Ms. Moon said, we would very much be favorable to work toward option B or some version of option B as we continue to work with staff. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dan. David, did I see you wanted to say something before we move to questions from the council? David?
No, not at all. No.
Okay, all right. Not at all. Okay. All right. So Jackie.
Could we, could you pull up option A again, please, Tina?
You mean to see the full language for option A?
Could you just go back to the option A slide?
Sure. So.
What I would like, thank you for doing that. I'm very, very interested to hear the input from the Stormwater Advisory Commission. We couldn't afford to hire that group of people, the expertise on the Stormwater Advisory Commission. So what I would like would be to have A and B both sent to the advisory boards so they can kind of look at both things before us and get a full scope. But I'm really interested in their in their expertise weighing in on this. Fully support the Arts Center. Little worried about setting a precedent with option B, and because stormwater is such a huge problem right now. So I would like for our advisory boards to see both of these so that when they come to us, they can have a full picture of what our two options really are, and they can make a fully informed recommendation.
All right, thanks, Jackie. So your recommendation is that they see option A and B and the proposed B, or just the first two options, or all three?
That they see all of it.
Okay. Well,
and that they get to weigh in on, because my experience with this group is that they may have some other tweaking to do based on getting all of the information.
Okay.
So I want their full expertise.
Well, I think the resolution that we would consider tonight, would essentially be to decide what we want to go to our advisory boards, and that could be all of these, right? And it would be obviously that they get them, they give us information back so that we can consider that at the public hearing on February 23rd.
Yeah, but I don't want to send them just option B.
Got it.
Or just modified option B. I want to send them everything that we've seen so that they can weigh in on everything we're looking at.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Barbara and then Randy.
Thank you, Lydia. And thank you, Councilmember Gist, because I was just thinking the same thing, just looking at option A and option B and just really trying to find that sweet spot, if you would, but also adding in that sprinkle of expertise that could come from our Stormwater Advisory Commission, that would come from them. Stormwater runoff and management is a top priority for the town and the council. So I just believe that we really have to be careful when we talk about doing changes or text amendments, from our land use ordinance, and that, kind of taking us away from that. So I'm in agreement with what Jackie is proposing. I would love for them to take a look at all of it and potentially find that kind of sweet spot where we're just kind of meshing all of those options and having some expertise coming from SWAC as well.
All right, thanks, Barbara. And right now our resolution would refer it to, it goes to Orange County, it goes to our planning board, And the other two that are checked off right now are Stormwater Advisory and EAB also. So, okay, let's see. Randy?
Yeah, thank you, Jackie, and thank you, Barbara. I agree 100%. When I read through this, not only did I think that the extraordinary expertise of the Stormwater Advisory Board should weigh in and help guide our thinking, but I'm going to ask Tina. Tina, would you put up the, the section, the LUO section 15-263G3, so we can look at the table? It's on.
This is the existing language, and here's the second piece of it with the table.
Right. That's okay. So if you look at the table, you know, what I was trying to understand, and this is what I think would be great to get feedback from the Stormwater Advisory Board, because the run of the curve numbers, okay, has to do with how much water is absorbed by the permeability of the soil. And so I thought, so the lower the numbers, the increased runoff is more permeable to the soil. This is out of 100. This charting goes from goes from 30 to 100, and here the least is least or equal to, less or equal to 64, with a maximum allowable increase in annual stormwater runoff volume being 400%. That seems like quite a lot. Is there any reason why this number is, we're not looking to get between 30 and 60 here?
So, Randy, what you're doing is you're looking at the part of our land use ordinance that obviously is at play in here in this subject. So I think that's perhaps a separate question, but it relates to what recommendation we can get back from the Stormwater Advisory Committee, I think.
Right, but in the option B, there's a blank. Okay, option B has a blank in where it says, in no case shall the annual runoff volume exceed more than blank times the amount. And I would hope that if the lowest on this chart is less than 60, less than or equal to 64, that could be 400%. Or Tina, correct me if I'm misinterpreting that.
I think you're hitting at the gist of the differences between the two approaches.
Yeah, well, so Tina, in essence, what I'm saying is I'd really like to have some feedback and guidance on that point, on the runoff curve from stormwater, okay, if we could.
Thank you, Randy. Let's see, Sammy.
So I agree. We definitely need feedback from our relevant advisory boards, and I'm glad they're already checked off stormwater and the EAB. I'm very troubled by the idea of having it just be an applicant saying that they can't meet the requirements versus setting a maximum amount that this table could be exceeded, which is option B. So personally, I'm fine if the boards look at all A, B, and the modified, but right off the bat, I can say that I'm very uncomfortable with leaving it open-ended in the modified B language. I also support the Art Center, and it's unfortunate that it is so hard to find land in Carrboro, and that the most affordable or most available one is one that is so constrained, and it's so available and affordable precisely because it's constrained. And so our challenge is, like, how do we support a nonprofit in our town without watering down and undermining our ordinances, which are there for a reason. We have a stormwater utility to which everyone is paying into to safeguard the water quality that we have. And in essence, we don't give preferences to anyone in the stormwater fees that get paid. And yet here, we may be giving preferences for folks to have more runoff on their property if they could only just prove that because of X, Y, and Z constraints on the property and the size of the building that they want to build, it's impossible for them to meet the spirit of our ordinance. So I'm going to be looking at this from a stormwater perspective. As much as I want to support the Art Center, this is the stormwater ordinance, and it's there for a reason. So I definitely look forward to feedback from our advisory boards. In both option A and B, I would like to request that the advisory boards take a crack at defining substantial. It's mentioned twice, substantial portion and substantially encumbered. If those could be looked at, and defining what substantial means, because in that ambiguity, we're again watering down our ordinance. Again, and also very much encouraged to look at how many times over this table we can exceed as a maximum for any applicant who's seeking to for this alternative way of addressing stormwater runoff. And then the applicant's done some calculations. It would be helpful to understand by how much they want to exceed the runoff. So if the advisory boards could receive that analysis that the applicant has already done, so they can understand kind of what is being asked. And in that way, they can be thinking about how many times over this table would be appropriate or not, given that this is prompted by the applicant. Those are my comments. So I totally agree. We need feedback from the advisory boards on this too.
Thanks, Sammy. Dan, do you want to respond to Sammy before I go to Susan?
If I could, and less of a response than more of a thank you for all your comments. And we look forward to working with the staff and the advisory boards on these. To Councilman Slade's question, yes, we have done calculations, but we will further refine those calculations. I would also like to just add for information that of the three basic stormwater management requirements laid out in the LUO, we easily meet two of them. It's the third that is challenging. And also, I think in the great scheme of things, this site represents less than 0.5% of the drainage basin to where it goes under 54 before it goes into Morgan Creek. We know stormwater management is important for Carrboro, but hopefully that can be taken into account as this moves forward to the advisory boards and we continue to work with staff on this. So thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Susan.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Dan. I too would look forward to getting feedback from the advisory boards. And I wanted to also just add on, Sammy was asking for a little more specificity around that term substantial. And I was hoping to get just a little bit more clarification where it says there is a clear community benefit inherent in the proposed development. I wasn't sure if that meant community benefit in terms of the environment, or say a nonprofit like Art Center promoting arts in the community, which is obviously a huge benefit. Is it thinking in that light as well, or more just the environmental benefits? That's a question for you, Dan. I was just looking for a little more specificity on that.
Thank you for that prompt. All of the above, and without getting in too much detail about talking about the project, because we really shouldn't be doing that tonight. We're talking about the text amendment. It would be a community benefit, both from the standpoint of what it brings to the community in terms of cultural resources and history and programs and that sort of thing. But also it would be a benefit in terms of actually a relatively light impact on a very challenging piece of property in terms of the amount of development intensity that can actually occur when you have a site that is nearly 50% stream buffer and there's an Owasso easement running across it and all that sort of thing. And we're leaving a majority of the property in a existing or restored vegetative state. So it's those kind of things that we were thinking about, and I'm sure we can all come up with more. I know that's a little bit subjective, but that's why we have a town council to think about those things. So thank you for your comment.
Right. Thank you, Susan. Thanks, Dan. If there's any other questions, anyone for Dan? If not, would someone like to make a motion putting forward all three of these options, I guess, and set for the resolution setting, I guess, the public hearing for February 23rd with the advisory boards on it?
I'll move the resolution, which includes the stormwater and the EAB with the comments that the council has shared to be shared with the advisory boards too, to help us think these questions.
Okay, and those are our additional boards, within the resolution, of course, is the planning board and Orange County. So motion by Sammy, second. Okay. If there's no further discussion, all in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
Aye. Sammy?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
And Susan?
Aye.
Okay, all right, we're set then for public hearing on this February 23rd.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, y'all. All right, Mr. Manager, moving on to the next item.
Okay, Mayor and members of the council, the next item on your agenda is a presentation from Ashley Hager. She's the director of the Orange County Food Council, and she's going to make her report. Ashley.
See if she is in. We had moved her down the agenda to give her a little more time. She wasn't going to be available right at 7:30. I'm not seeing John on here either. Ashley or John, whoever's here for this presentation, if you could raise your hand, and if not, we'll move on to the next one and then loop back in when she's here. I think go on to the next item and then we'll come back to this one.
Okay, all right,
Okay.
Mr. Manager, let's move on to the next one then.
Okay, so Mayor and members of the council, the next item on your agenda is information on text amendments required as part of General Statutes Chapter 160D, Part 1, and probably Trish or Nick will discuss that, I believe.
I've got Tina still here. Trish, if you're there, I've got a lot of Town of Carrboro signed in, but I can't tell who is
Good
specifically
evening,
signed
it's
in.
me again,
Okay.
if I may.
All right, Tina.
Let me get I have another short PowerPoint, which I'll start sharing in just a moment. Okay, sorry about that. So good evening again.
Hello.
Okay, so as you may recall, in February, in October, staff brought a very short update that we were going to start bringing to you information related to these required amendments in bundles. In part because this is, as you can begin to see, this is a lot of information, and we thought it would be a little bit more of a digestible way of approaching this if we brought it in clusters, and then when we have brought it all to you and the planning board, we come forth with one public hearing for all of it in one swoop around May so that we can have everything adopted by the July 1st deadline. So what you have in your packet today, I've summarized this here on the cover sheet. You have a working draft ordinance. You have a table which is organized by the topical areas from the School of Government that has been kind of taking the lead to help staff make these changes. You'll notice through there that we've tried to know what things are required, what are things that are optional. There's a lot of overlap. And there are areas where I've included some of this information, even where an amendment isn't needed, just to help you get a sense of the breadth of related and kind of the focus point of these changes. We've also are trying to work in some of these administrative changes for gender neutral language, town council, things of that sort. So the focus of this first bundle has to do with things related to procedural changes. I've identified the 6 articles we have before you for tonight, and we will very highlight top of the heap of importance, just run through these really quickly. For administrative mechanisms, these are mainly related to the advisory boards. The big change is emphasizing the proportional representation for the ETJ and requiring this oath of office or this swearing in of advisory boards before they begin their duties. This is a little bit of a change from what we do now. The most notable changes are really in permits and final plat approval. I won't go through all of these, but the biggies are the term conditional use permit will go away. So we will change that to be Class A special use permits that will go to the town council, and Class B special use permits that will go to the Board of Adjustment. The biggest thing, and this is kind of in a cluster in Chapter 160D, is permit choice and vested rights and new legislation related to multi-phase development. And again, these are all in kind of one bundle in Chapter 160D. In our ordinance, they're actually in different articles. So we will provide more information about this as we get to those subsequent articles. There's also updated information related to performance guarantees or bonds, which we use quite a bit here, as well as some information related to subdivisions. The other thing that we're trying to do as part of this effort is to update some of our references to long-range plans for either conformity for permits or consistency to amendments. And that would be to include a reference to our upcoming comprehensive plan and to stop referencing the thoroughfare plan that we really don't use anymore and update it for long-range transportation plans. The big change here under Article 5 is to include a new section for determinations. We now refer to interpretations, which is a staff interpretation of the zoning map. This would be something more specific related to, say, a staff interpretation of language in the ordinance or another administrative approval. The example that the School of Government gives is when staff approves a permit and the neighbors don't know about it because there isn't a public hearing. So this is a way to set things up so that neighbors can get more involved in these type decisions, and that there's a way to appeal them by going to the Board of Adjustment. So we'll probably do a little bit more on this as we continue to work through this. Under signs, we've only made a reference or an update to the reference to conditional use permits, which we have for master sign permits. This is something we started for 300 East Main a few years ago. We may have to make further changes with this related to content, which we're not supposed to be regulating. So we're working with the attorney on these changes. Under amendments, the big change here is to really emphasize the term legislative for legislative hearings versus evidentiary or quasi-judicial hearings. A big thing of note is the conflict of interest provisions for both the advisory boards and the council is expanded to include familiar association relationships instead of just a financial interest. There's also a little bit of new information related to providing notice, so that posted notice has to happen the same time as mailed notice, that 10 to 25 day period. And then finally, neighborhood preservation. This is just to change the term for design guidelines to design standards, and to clarify that when the Appearance Commission is acting in this capacity, they need to follow quasi-judicial proceedings. This isn't something big at the town right now, but it's important to make that change. So just in summary, the work is ongoing. The materials are in draft form. We will likely make some additional changes as we get to areas where they kind of there's a reference to one thing and we've noticed something that maybe we could have worded better. If we make a substantive change, we will point that out to you when we bring it forward. And finally, there are some areas where I don't think we'll be doing kind of a reformatting because we'll have an opportunity to do that after the comprehensive plan. So at this point, we're focusing on what we need to do to meet these requirements and try to make some other updates, clerical errors and so forth. So I'll stop there and I'm happy to answer questions or just take emails to make corrections later on.
Thanks, Tina. I had two quick comments and then I don't know if anyone else has anything to ask. One is, and this was just a stylistic thing I noticed as I was reading through the kind of where the codes are going to be amended. In several places where you made the change, it would say class A or B, but then on another page, it might say class B or A. So I don't know if I would just, my suggestion would be to just be consistent with it throughout, like class A or B throughout, rather than mixing them back and forth.
Okay.
And then the other question I had was, it seemed to me like perhaps there was an enhanced responsibility on the chair of, I guess it would be me in a council meeting, and then perhaps our chair in a planning board of almost like a judge of sorts with evidentiary standards and so forth. Can you explain that a little bit? And it's okay if you don't want to now. You could also send us an email, or Nick could, or something. But it just seems like there's a greater responsibility on the person who's running the meeting to kind of, I don't know, understand the rules of evidence a little more. It's almost that's the way I kind of took it in. And again, if you'd like, we could get some follow up about that later. So I just wanted to mention.
You are correct. And there's similarly, and when we can bring back, we can focus on that with a little extra information when we come back for the next installment. But there's similarly a new provision where if someone on an advisory board or on the council identifies what they believe is a conflict of interest on one of the sitting board members, and that person is not interested in recusing themselves, the group can vote and make a decision as to whether that person needs to be recused. So there are a couple of nuanced things of that sort. So thank you for bringing that up, and I'm happy to provide some clarification on that.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate it. Okay, anyone else have any comments or thoughts about this? One more question, I guess, Tina, just real quick, and then I'll go to Susan and Damon. You said we're going to get this in several rounds this spring. How many rounds are we talking about of receiving? How many more batches before we get that final batch at the end with the public hearing?
We initially identified 3 installments. It may be possible to do a 4th. I think we were looking at, I'd have to look at the calendar to be sure, but I think we were looking at a request to set in mid to late April so that we could have a public hearing in May to give us additional time if needed to meet that end of the spring semester, if you will, schedule.
Okay. All right. Great. Thanks, Tina. All right. I saw Susan and then Damon.
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tina. I have one really quick question, and the only reason I'm asking this question is it came up last week when I was talking about the advisory boards taking on an advocacy role, and I learned through Damon that advisory boards shouldn't take on that role. So as we're talking about the conflicts of interest, I have no idea, but is that something that would be relevant in terms of adding in here, specifying that the boards do not take on an advisory board, or is that something that's more relevant for something else?
The conflict of interest provisions are specific to legislative decisions. So I'll say that, and then with like a semicolon, I'll add that because the advisory boards are much more advisory, well, they're advisory in general, but they're advisory with all quasi-judicial decisions. So they're only offering information to the council to make, or the Board of Adjustment to make decisions. So I think generally speaking, the not advocating and being neutral and advisory is probably the best rule of thumb.
Okay. Thank you, Dina.
Okay, Susan, thank you. Damon?
Thanks, Lydia. It looks like we don't really have a decision to make tonight, so I just really wanted to thank Tina and her colleagues for all the work. As we talked a little bit last week when we approved all the changes that Kathy and the staff made for gender neutral language in the code. This is a huge project, and I think we're really lucky that we have a professional staff who knows what they're doing to manage all this. So I also just would appreciate the way that you're going about bringing these in batches to us so that we can actually digest them as the non-pros that we are. So thanks again, Tina, for all your work.
All right, great. Thank you, Damon. Let's see, Randy?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank Tina for the table in the planning department for that. I found it very helpful. And I would say that hopefully when you release the next installments, there was a lot of material to go through, and just to be aware that I think I personally hit my limit with having attachments, A through H, 8 attachments, but, and of course the table, as I said, was very helpful. So thank you for that. And I appreciate the enormous amount of work that this takes.
Yeah, absolutely, Randy. Good comments. Okay, if there's nothing else for Tina, then I think this is what we were supposed to do, just kind of review the material, ask questions, get an update, understand where we're going with these changes. So I think we're good with this item, right?
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
so Kathy, I'm not sure. Oh, I see our person in the, she's here now. Ashley's here now.
Okay, good.
So we can go back to the item about the Food Council.
Okay, so Ashley, if you're ready to make a presentation on the Food Policy Council report, we're ready.
All right. I joined just in the nick of time. Sorry, y'all.
No,
I literally just got 2 10-month-olds to bed, so I'm here. So I'll start off by introducing myself, and then I'll start sharing my screen for the presentation. I am Ashley Hager. I'm the coordinator of the Orange County Food Council, and it's good to see you all. Though I imagine that I would be seeing you differently when I return from maternity leave. Hi there. So I know that your agenda is pretty full tonight. I'm going to keep my presentation to under 10 minutes, but if there's ever a time that I need to pause and clarify, or if you just have questions throughout, please don't hesitate to let me know. And as usual, I will take questions and any discussion at the end as well. Let me pull this up. About that. I'm so sorry, y'all. Of course, the night that I'm presenting, I'm having technical difficulties. Let me pull this up for you.
Ashley, if it keeps messing up, you can just email, this is Kathy. You could email it to me and John if you want, and then I can share it, and you can just, I'll try to anticipate when you need to move forward with the slide, but just nudge me if I don't get it.
I'm going to try and pull it up one more time right now.
Okay.
Of course, I made it through all of the other councils without this issue, but I appreciate your patience. So let me try it one more time, and then I'm going to move to the share your screen function. We'll see if it works. Okay. Can everyone see the slides? It says loading at the moment, but it should be up in just a minute.
Yeah, you're
Right now. Yep.
Thank you again for being patient. Okay, so tonight's presentation is just a brief overview of what the Food Council has been doing since my position was hired under the county manager's office in 2019, and a bit of a preview of what we plan to be doing in this current fiscal year and beyond. So again, just a progress report, scope of work for the coming fiscal year, and then one thing that I've added on to tonight's presentation that was requested by the county commissioners in November was a sort of summary report of the state of food insecurity during the pandemic. I shared that report with all of our council liaisons back in December. It should be in your packet tonight, but I'm happy to sort of dig into some of those details this evening and answer any questions you might have. So if you remember in 2018, when the council was proposing the full-time coordinator position be shared by all of the jurisdictions and positioned under the county manager, we had proposed that we would provide a sort of living work plan. Since that time, we have made progress in each of the identified areas. Any of the changes that took place to that work plan, and again, it was always intended to sort of be something that evolved along with our work. Those changes were done in collaboration with our partners, like nonprofit agencies in the community leaders, elected liaisons, and the rest of the Food Council. I think the most significant change, or just an overall shift in our work, has been much more focused on actually centering equity and looking at not only trainings for council members and sort of learning as a council, but really embedding equity in our actions and our framework, and focusing on centering more lived experience in our council and the way we make decisions, and also our sort of community efforts. I apologize for the amount of text that you all are about to see, but here is just a quick rundown of the different areas that we were working in since 2018. So we facilitated a number of partnerships, specifically some local food procurement partnerships between UNC, local childcare centers, Orange County schools, and Farmer Food Share to increase the amount of local foods being served in our institutions and in the county. We created a community food resource guide in collaboration with DSS and a number of the food service nonprofits in the county, really trying to focus on having a one-stop shop where we could provide the community with all of the information you need to know if you're looking for any food resources. This was done pre-pandemic. We are trying to update it with all of the information available with the emergency food services, and not trying to overwhelm folks because we know there's a lot of different resources circulating. We facilitated a number of social justice and racial equity workshops. These were free workshops intended just to share sort of like the framework of the Food Council, along with a number of our partners and collaborators, including the Partnership to End Homelessness. We met with a number of food service providers to really think about how we could share best practices around centering equity and just improving the way food is delivered in the county. Something that I did as a coordinator is at the County Commissioners Annual Retreat in January, when we were all still in the same room together. I presented a state of food security sort of broad summary report to them. I'm happy to share that with you all if you'd like to see it. Part of what I shared in December is an update from that state of food security report, but really focused on how things have changed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And here's just a few more points I'm going to run through. We created an educational infographic back in February, focused on the connections between living wage, affordable housing, and systemic racism, and how those things intersect and compound with each other to impact things like food security, that you cannot separate many of these issues. That infographic was shared again with all of our liaisons back in February. A lot of the details in it have not changed, surprisingly. And I can reshare that with anyone that's interested. But some of the information around like the amount of food insecure households in the county have obviously changed since the pandemic began. A few more points. We have really focused on a facilitation of relationships between existing county and town resources and some of our institutions, specifically looking at issues like reducing food waste in our schools, looking at the model of Chapel Hill Carrboro city schools and how well they've done with the composting program and how we might be able to expand that into Orange County schools. That had begun right before the pandemic started. It is now on hold, but the Orange County school system plans to continue a composting program when they are back up and running as normal. We led the development of a regional food collaborative. This is focused on looking at the triangle as well as state level issues around food, like food access, the local food economy, thinking that we would need to work across county lines eventually to make some bigger changes. We supported the development of standard operating procedures around food waste and food recovery at DHHS in collaboration with a number of those food councils in the region. And my final points for this progress report is that we created an agricultural trust fund proposal with our Ag Preservation Board and had provided that to all of our elected liaisons and given it to the county manager, with the one caveat that we were going to take a second, go into a second phase where we did a racial equity assessment using some of the GARE model and one of our equity coaches that we've worked with for the past few years. And out of that assessment, the recommendation was to focus on the experiences of Black farmers and to work more directly with them to develop some resources that are needed in the county. So instead of moving forward with that proposal, there's been an agreement among the group to support an Orange County Black Farmer think tank, which has been operating since August. And I will go into some more details about that think tank a little bit later in my slides. And finally, we have been coordinating weekly, but now turned monthly food system calls focused on COVID, food emergency, things happening along the supply chain with local farms, with emergency food services and things like that. And that is ongoing for now. This is a quick overview of our current fiscal year scope of work. We are continuing with the development of a food policy agenda. This is a broad process that we don't think will be just 2 years and we've fixed the food system in the towns of the county, but it's really intended to be a starting place where we can develop methodologies for addressing specific issues within our food system and coming up with policy and practice recommendations that we can provide to all of the jurisdictions in the county to make those changes. So that is our biggest piece of work in the coming years. In addition to that, we are recruiting new council members. We are focusing on the relationships that we've built the last 4 years and the ones that we still need to be nurturing to help with the food policy agenda process. We are supporting our partners, especially during these very trying times with the things that they are taking on with the pandemic and prior to the pandemic. And then we've been involved in the past about 1.5 years with the development of a racial equity community data index. This is modeled after things that we've seen in Durham County as well as Tacoma, Washington. And that work right now is with the county human rights department. Okay, so this is just a very quick overview of what a food policy agenda is. A number of other food councils across the US have engaged in this process and found a lot of success because the food system is very broad. So if you look to the left, this is just an overview of the food system and its main sectors. So you've got production, processing, distribution, consumption, and then recovery or waste. We are proposing that in the 2 years we are in right now with this food policy agenda design process, we are only looking at agriculture and production and consumption or access. So we're framing it around agriculture and access, but those are the two sectors we're really focused on right now. If you look just next to that image, you'll see what I hope explains the kind of framework that the Food Council is using at this time. So words like equity and equality have become very popular in recent years, and there's a number of different definitions floating around there. The way that we are defining racial equity and the way that we want to operate in this work is, if you look at that first image, you've got barriers to access, right? So you've got the fence, but everyone has the same box to stand on, but different capacities to be able to see over that fence. In the middle, you're seeing interventions like additional boxes given to those who need additional support to be able to engage in the game. And then finally, to the right, all the way, you'll see that the fence is gone. And this is the form of equity that we are really focused on right now, is not providing interventions or Band-Aids, but looking at the systemic issues that are causing the problems and trying to start there. So this work is long-term, and it really relies on those relationships with the folks that are most impacted in frontline communities. Again, this is just a sort of breakdown of what the food policy agenda is and the process that we are already engaged in right now. So identifying gaps and opportunities for improving the local food system. In 2015, the Food Council developed a very quantitative but comprehensive community food baseline assessment. And that has helped really focus where we work as a council since. We are using a lot of the gaps and spaces in that assessment to determine where we work right now, in addition to the relationships we've built over the last few years. Next is developing an agreement between partners and community members that are engaged in the process, where everyone understands their roles. It's clear how we are centering lived experience and racial equity in the process. And that's where we are right now, actually. We are engaged in that process. And then the sort of, deliverable out of the food policy agenda would be providing recommendations for best practices and potential policy changes to all the jurisdictions. I just want to be clear that we don't see that deliverable as a one-time thing, that it would be an ongoing process, that the food system is pretty broad and we don't intend to cover everything in 2 years. I've covered a lot of this, so I'm just going to take a moment to give a quick summary. But again, let me know if you have questions. We are focusing on lived experience as a driver for this work. Those that are closest to the issues are helping inform what the solutions can look like. A focus on accountability and transparency. So, for example, the Orange County Black Farmer think tank that we have been supporting is essentially a pilot process, and we are documenting that process and forming a methodology for how we will shape our work around food access and other issues. And all of that work will be publicly available. And hopefully some of the farmers out of that think tank will actually be able to provide some presentations later this year about their process and how they've been working with the Food Council. We believe that the Racial Equity Community Data Index is complementary to this work because it can help us track outcomes. A lot of times policy changes have the best intentions, but the outcomes don't always match those intentions. And then we also learn along the way. So we need some sort of mechanism to measure how well we are doing, in addition to having accountability with community members that are experiencing the issues. And finally, we have been, as a Food Council, participating in the long-term recovery effort that has been facilitated by the county and in collaboration with all the towns, focused on what are the lessons learned during the COVID crisis and how are we making changes long-term to not only recover as a community, but to prepare for potential crises in the future. I don't know if I should press pause here, just move quickly on to the food security report, if there are any questions.
Let me check in right here. Council members, do you want to hear the rest, and then we can ask any questions or comments at the end? I see Jackie and then Barbara.
This was with the first half. Thank you. This must be very difficult work during this time. And I'm sure having 2 infants at home doesn't make it any easier, but congratulations and thank you.
Thank you.
I know I've brought this up before. When you're looking for new members, what is your relationship with the Carolina cupboard? I know food insecurity is much more prevalent among college people than we would suspect, and I know that now they're struggling during the pandemic. Are they involved on your committee yet?
Yes. So, Councilperson Jacqueline, thank you for bringing that back up. We made an intentional effort last year to recruit from campus, recognizing that not having a representative from the student body, having worked with mostly faculty in the past, which is wonderful, that's an amazing resource, but not having the student body represented, especially when it comes to food access issues, was a problem. So Keandra Jenkins, who was one of the, I don't want to misrepresent her role, but I think she was like a board member of the pantry. She's now since graduated, but she's still a food council member. So she's been with us for a little over a year. And we're hoping to recruit more. I think particularly during this difficult time when students are experiencing food emergencies on top of food insecurity that was probably already there. There's lack of recognition, I think, not only in the federal level, but sometimes in the local level, that students are often not eligible for services like EBT and SNAP, which, is not, it doesn't really make sense. So anyways, these are the sort of like systemic issues that we've been grappling with, but not always had representation. So Keandra joined us last year. She brings a really wonderful perspective as a student and also just someone who is very wise and hopefully will be doing public policy in the future.
Great, thank you.
All right, thanks, Jackie. And Barbara, did you have a question before we go on?
Yeah. Hey, Ashley, and congratulations too on your 2 bundles of joy. So I love how you're lifting up lived experience and racial equity, and you're talking about the justice approach to addressing hunger and the relationship between food security and housing and systemic racism. So, I'm glad to see you lift all that up. Now, when you talk about centering racial equity and lived experience, exactly how do you see that looking? Is that how the Food Council has been operating? Is that how you're going to operate going forward? And what does that look like?
A good question. And thank you for giving me this space to answer. So let me walk you all through what our journeys look like very quickly. In the beginning of the Food Council's formation, what that equity work looked like was everyone go to an RAI phase 1 training, maybe phase 2, we pay for it. We have some discussions, and we sort of assume that from there it has been embedded in our work. We realized pretty quickly, though not quickly enough, obviously, as a group, that this was a lot of patting on the back, and it wasn't serving our purpose of really thinking about systemic issues, specifically racial inequities in the food system, because our food system is built on racial inequities. It was built on slavery. It exists and performs the way it does because of those connections to that history. So we hired a racial equity coach, Tina Vasquez, with Emergent Equity back in, 2021 now, 2018.
She fire. She fire.
Bless Tina and all the work she does.
Yes.
So what we did is think about coaching specifically around our culture and the way we operate as a group, because all of our work, all of the policy recommendations, the prioritizing, the type of relationships we built, were always going to stem from that internal culture. And Sammy is welcome to chime in and correct me at any point in time as well. But so from 2018, we worked with her as a coach. And then that's when we really started to think about, like, how is this impacting our policy work? How do we want it to impact a food policy agenda process? And so now, a part of the reason that we said, let's put this policy proposal on hold, let's focus on relationships with those most impacted and with lived experience. Let's pay them like consultants for their intellectual property, because Black farmers have been stolen from a lot not only in this community, but all over the US. So we have sort of reprioritized, reinvested in those relationships and thought about relationships with community members as a sort of consulting process. We hope that this think tank is a pilot process for how we might do things in the future. And maybe that think tank group eventually becomes a sort of brain trust that over 10, 15, 20 years has more and more people from the community engaged in the process, and also in more deep connections with their elected officials to help drive what these changes look like. That it's a sort of advisory board in ways that we've not seen advisory boards function in the past. I realize that all sounds very gray and a bit wiggly, for lack of better words, but we are sort of building the plane as we fly it. And we're trying to do it in the least exploitive and most transparent way possible.
Actually, that's great. And I appreciate the acknowledgement, especially around just the history, because that's what REI training is, right? It's a lot of history, and it describes a template upon which, white supremacy was built. And, it's like embedded in everything. And so first thing is to recognize and acknowledge that, and then, just put it to work for you, in whatever you're doing. And I really appreciate that approach, that the Food Council is taking. It is excellent. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's not perfect, but we're learning.
You're working on it. I love it. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks, Barbara, for those comments. So let's go ahead and see the rest of your presentation, Ashley, and then we'll see what other comments folks have.
I know I'm taking up a lot of space, y'all, so I appreciate it, but I'm gonna try and move it along. Okay. So again, I believe it was 2 pages. I may have gotten to 3 pages for the sort of food insecurity report I provided back in December. And these are intended to be kind of quarterly reports going forward, because we don't necessarily have all of the data on how food insecurity is impacted by the pandemic at this time. And we won't probably by the end of March either. So this is a sort of a role that the Food Council has agreed to take on, where we are in touch with the various actors across the food system, handling food access issues and trying to provide a sort of snapshot to our elected officials along the way. So again, the data has been limited, but here are some of the trends that we've seen or the folks that are on the front lines have seen. So there was an initial spike, of course, in April, followed by a slowdown. DSS and others have attributed some of the slowdown to the stimulus checks that went out in early summer. Something that has been significant, though, was the spike in federal nutrition services applications that came in April and has been pretty steady ever since. We expect that upward trend of a request for more support, especially with FNS, Food Nutrition Services, is probably going to continue well through this winter time. And this was the last time that I sort of put this together was back in December, before some things happened in the federal government. But the assumption being that some of the housing crisis is not going to get better, even if there is a continuation of no evictions and things like that, that unless people see some of the supports they needed for example, if you have not been able to pay rent since May, and that there's no forgiveness for that rent, what is going to happen some months down the road? And how is that going to impact other parts of your life, like food insecurity? So that's, again, why I say that the data is limited. We don't know what we don't know. But as a Food Council, we're trying our best to just be in touch with the folks that are on the front lines, that are collecting this data, that are providing services, to try and give quarterly reports where we can provide information about, like, here's what we know from FNS programs. Here's what we know from some of the pickups in Chapel Hill and Carrboro. But to do that through an equity lens. And so how we're proposing to do that is to look at the intersectional nature. So to be in touch with the folks at the housing department and to see how some of these things intersect, as well as to never lose sight that many of the issues we're seeing right now pre-existed this pandemic. They have been made worse by it, certainly. And we don't know what that will look like at the end of the pandemic. But many of these issues around affordable housing, wages, safety nets, access to healthcare, and how those things trickle into your access to fresh, nutritious foods, these are issues that predate COVID. So that will always be present in these reports as a sort of centering of those systemic issues and how they impact what we're seeing. This is a quick snapshot. This was only up until about October because some of these reports weren't available past that date. But you'll see that initial spike in FNS applications. Something we've heard from a number of providers, including IFC, is that in past recessions, when they've seen something like this, while the spike might be something that happens quickly and then comes down a bit, usually the number of people they are serving or supporting stays higher than it did pre-crisis. So for example, 2008, 2009, while there was an initial spike in need and maybe that came down, the amount of people they were serving was still higher after 2009 than it was prior. And they've seen that over there. I should know this, but IFC has been around for a very long time, like many years. So I heard that from them, and I've heard it from a number of other organizations. This, I don't know how illuminating it'll be for you all, but it gives you some hard numbers. So this is overall meals served. If you look at the far right column, caloric intake, that was documented to really be thinking about supply chain issues, which I am still working out with Cooperative Extension and some folks in the Economic Development Office to really think about what supply chain issues impacted food access and our ability to get emergency foods to the community. You'll see that, again, there's that initial spike and then it slowly comes down. I hope to provide some more numbers from November through February in the March report that I plan to provide to you all. Here's the infographic I mentioned that was from February 2020. I can follow up with this as a PDF to you all if you're interested. We want to update it with information about the pandemic, but when we took a look back at it in December, we realized that a lot of this information still holds true. I will say that top number, 12.7, is looking like closer to almost 14%. That's some of the predictions we're seeing from different organizations that have been collecting data throughout the pandemic. But if you look at the lower parts where we're really thinking about like what is fair market rent for an apartment for a family that is making a living wage, a lot of those numbers still remain the same. And I'm recognizing time, so I don't want to take up too much space, but I'm happy to dig into details if folks have questions. And then again, we will be providing more reports later this spring. Part of what we hope to do in the next few months is to focus much more on the qualitative information from frontline communities. Thankfully, I have a few interns that I'm going to be working with that can collect more of the hard data as well to include in the next report. Okay.
All right, Ashley, thank you. Thank you for that report. Okay, council members, any further comments about the last half or the overall report? Let's go to Susan and then to Sammy.
Thank you, Mayor LaBelle. Thank you, Ashley, for the presentation tonight. I remember when we had our second, somebody said 1 is 1 and 2 is 4. So it probably feels like 4 right now, and good luck over the next 17 years. So yes, I really appreciate Food Council becoming sort of like a clearinghouse, right, for information for all of these organizations that are working on the front lines. And my question for you is, based on what you've seen during the pandemic, what you've seen, what you've heard from those working on the front lines, what is the biggest gap in our food delivery system? Mm-hmm. And once you decide on that gap, once you share that gap, what is one specific thing that the Food Council can do with nonprofits in the community to help close that gap?
Well, Susan, this is making me think of the last time I saw you on a Zoom with the Food First or Food for the Summer group, which is now focused on the pandemic. And I think I mentioned on the call that the most significant thing we've heard is the way services are delivered, that if there's existing relationships with organizations like IFC or Porch or Table, that it is much easier to understand like other resources available in the community, right? So if Porch or Table is delivering information, it's typically more user friendly for those groups. They will engage with other resources throughout the community. But I'd say the most significant gap we've heard about comes back to the way we're delivering services. That while picking up food or having food dropped off to your house is important, it's not the most justice-oriented way of delivering services, right? And I think that some of the organizations like Porch and others have been exploring gift cards and how to increase just access to money. Because let's say that on a Tuesday, you can go and pick up milk and a box of food. Maybe you don't need that, and maybe it's not culturally appropriate food. That's another thing that we've heard. But if you have access to a gift card or direct funds, then you can buy the shampoo and toothpaste that you need in your house that day, or you can buy particular foods that you need. We have seen that a number of other communities over the fall were discussing the same issue, specifically with how to use CARES Act funding to provide direct funds to community members and those in need, instead of trying to do the more traditional charity-based route of the food bank, right? And it's not knocking on the food bank or these food delivery services, because they are vital, especially during emergencies. But it is, how can we do that? How can we meet that baseline? And how can we go a bit further? How can we give people the agency and the resources they need to make their own decisions and to be able to buy their own food? So I think the second part of your question was, how can the Food Council engage in that process? I think the best way we found so far is to continue to be in touch with those operating on the front lines, to figure out these best practices and then share them with others. Where we sort of operate is looking at how these food insecurity issues predate the pandemic and how they were made worse by this. And likely we are going to have some other issue, whether that is connected to climate change or another virus, I'm not sure, but it's very likely that this is not the last emergency we'll see in our lifetime. So how do we prepare for that going forward? And the way that the Food Council is proposing to engage in that is through this food policy agenda process. So Orange County Black Farmer Think Tank is essentially a group of Black farmers that have been paid to meet and to think deeply about these issues, their own experiences, and then begin providing recommendations for how we might change those systemic issues. We are right now in the process of trying to develop a think tank around food insecurity with those with lived experience. But we're trying to figure out, do we have a separate think tank or something that is connected where we're working with the practitioners, right? So the organizations that have been doing this for many years. And I think that's where our work is we can provide these summary reports, we can be a clearinghouse, we can try and be a connector and a support in any way possible in real time, but to try and use the lessons learned from the organizations and agencies, as well as those experiencing food insecurity, to really think about the systemic issues. And are there policy fixes? Are there practices that we can change? And this is not proposing changing food insecurity overnight, but it is trying to really get at, how do we get out of this cyclical nature of these issues?
Mm-hmm. I appreciate you, all the good work you're doing, Ashley.
I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. Let's see, I think Sammy, you're next.
Yes, I just want to thank Ashley so much for presenting to our council. It's so important for the council to hear about all the good work that the Food Council's been doing, and this intersection between direct service and addressing the systemic, which is why we are working so much on the equity and racism aspect of the system. And we're very, very fortunate to have many service providers in our community, and the council's role is to link those two. As Susan points out, it's a clearinghouse, but it's also pushing the envelope further in trying to address the systemic aspects for why people go hungry and need food. And also, is essential when there's not so many resources. The food council's leveraged a lot of help from the university and being able to achieve some of this work, and also from community members through the various subcommittees that the food council has had. And we're very lucky to be participating in this think tank process and model, because it really does address the access to participation by people who historically aren't able to participate. And like Ashley points out, recognizing the knowledge that they bring to the table and not doing it in an exploitative way, or at least approximating that as best we can. Anyways, I think Ashley summarized everything super well, and I'm very glad for you, Ashley, and for your presentation and for the work that you're doing. And I'm glad you're back from your maternity leave, though I know that makes it 3 babies, not just 2. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, Sammy. I appreciate that.
Thanks, Sammy. Good comments. Let's go Randy and then Barbara.
Yeah. Whoa, Ashley, twins. Oh, man. Well, we'll see you in about 18 years. Because that's the way life is going to roll.
How it feels.
Congratulations.
You.
You're I'm impressed. I'm very impressed. My question is twofold. One, back in March, April, I was involved with some folks who were working on food supply and distribution. There were about 25 different organizations on the calls. And one of the things I'd like to know is, going forth, does the Food Council orchestrate the meetings with these folks at this point? Is that part of what you're doing?
With those meetings with cooperative extension, economic development, and a number of like the farmers and the farm market managers at the time? Yes.
These were generally the nonprofits locally, Chapel Hill, Carrboro, and some county folks.
So those meetings have been organized by county DSS. Some of our council members were present in the meetings, but because I was on maternity leave during that time, I wasn't involved. My understanding is that those meetings are not continued at this time. It's sort of just like honed in on the specific food distributions. I believe that DSS reaches out to the nonprofits, and Susan may know more, to try and gauge like their needs, information they'd like to share, things like that. But I don't believe that those meetings are ongoing. I think in part because things were shifting so rapidly from March to May that it was sort of like, well, we all have to go on the same page. Because if you're delivering on a Tuesday and I am too, how do we avoid that issue? Are you having trouble finding rice or milk? How can we pair it, right? Like there was a need for that sort of like 60 to 90 day emergency planning. So it was good to have folks organizing. But my understanding sense is that people have sort of settled into their new roles and the situation that we're all handling, on top of they have added additional programming, right? More drop-offs, more clients, more services that they're providing. So they had to sort of draw back at some point from other meetings. Going back to Susan's question, I think the Food Council is really interested, similar to what we've seen Corey be able to do with the Partnership to End Homelessness, to I guess, help facilitate or hold space for these larger coalitions where not just those with lived experience, but those that have been working in these areas and are power players, right? Like these nonprofits require resources and money and do a lot of work in this community, and are part of our decision-making structure. So we want to think about how we can help facilitate that sort of coalition space eventually. When I've checked in with individual agencies and organizations, it's sort of been okay, we realized that we could use that now. We really needed it back in March and April, but now is not the time. We are overwhelmed. And I know that there are some, and I don't want to share information that's not mine, but I know that there are some that are really thinking about data sharing, working with groups that might be able to help them really think about these new models of being more collaborative. So we are trying our best to stay engaged in that process with them while not overwhelming them.
And so, yeah, I really appreciate that, because my next question was going to be about the whether you see that data sharing is occurring in order to maximize the efficiency.
I'm trying to get this right politically. Let me start with the county side of things. Part of the reason that we had proposed a community data index as a county was to increase data sharing between county departments, because there are issues there. Mm-hmm. And this is not pointing fingers. This is simply looking at institutions and the way we were built, back to Barbara's point, that we were built to not be transparent and to operate from a white supremacist model. And so there's been a lot of harm that's sort of just been filtered throughout these institutions over years, which is a lack of data sharing, a lack of understanding what each other does. And again, it's not to point fingers. It's just to sort of like, we've inherited these systems and institutions. How do we make them more functional? So we think that that's super important from the sort of county internal side, including collaboration with the towns, which I think the GARE process is going to be able to help deliver in some ways, but it's going to take time. As far as data sharing goes among organizations, I think it just varies based on the groups, based on relationships, and trust and history. And so it's still going to take time to get past that some past issues. But if we can just have a space, maybe when folks get on the other side of this pandemic and can take a deep breath, where the Food Council might be able to help facilitate quarterly calls, quarterly meetings, where we can just build those relationships, that's where we'd like to be supportive.
And so I really appreciate those two responses. It's great. I guess my question is, when you look at the timeline going forward, between now and when folks will get a 75 to 77% vaccination rate, we've got quite a spread of time, which it could be, it could be January 2022 until we see that. In addition, because that affects the economy the way it does, and the economy really needs to be reimagined and recreated in many ways. You're right, folks need to, rent gets fed first. So I know several people who, not only am I helping them with rent, but when it comes to food, Thanksgiving, I was buying turkeys. I mean, so what's going to change in terms of the delivery? In other words, what are the real numbers on the people who are not only food insecure in the short run, but what we expect over this next year? I mean, I'd love to see a timeline so I could get a sense of, the kind of organizations that are delivering, where they see that they've had to expand their work, whether it be in actual banked food or in gift cards, and how do we make equitable that distribution? Because one of the other issues is in Southern Orange, we have a lot of organizations, a lot of nonprofits who we're able to get out there and do the work of banking food and getting as much distributed, but it's not equitably distributed throughout the county.
I think this mirrors the same issue with vaccinations. You have an idea of how you want to deliver services, but we might not have the systems available at this time to do that, right? So while it would be great just to provide a check to everyone in the county to say, go and get the food, whether it's online or however you need to, we're just not at that point. I think it is a really interesting idea to try and track this process the entire time and maybe provide a sort of timeline that says, here's some issues we saw early on, here's how they were addressed, but here's how it's impacting us long term. So I will definitely bring that back to the council and the interns that I'm going to be working with to think about how we might use that as a framework over time. But I do think you are right that I sort of expect to be providing some of these food insecurity reports to you all long term. The impacts will have a ripple effect. So even when we are in a new way of a new normal and sort of back to seeing each other and vaccinations are up, I still think that the impacts of the economic crisis, the healthcare crisis are going to impact things like food security long term.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Randy. And then Barbara.
Yeah, actually, I just have one more question. I saw on one of the slides you talked about recruiting, and you're looking for new members. Who's on the council now? Like, who are you looking for? Certain folks, or what? I mean, how are you recruiting, or who are you recruiting for? Or
so we have typically about 3 members roll off annually, and we replace those members. We put out a call for new members in the fall, and our equity committee reviewed those applications. And the way our application process has functioned the last few years, it's very different right now to do recruitment. I think specifically because people are overwhelmed. Even those that are in the sort of, and this is a new term I've heard, and I am a part of it, the Zoom class, who have the privilege and time to be able to work from home safely and can volunteer time. We're all overwhelmed, right? So there's been a lack of responses there. We did find one new member that we're really excited about, who is a social worker in the county. And so we're really focused on trying to have more food access centered on the council from the practitioner side, as well as lived experience. So that when we start really thinking about, okay, if we're recruiting lived experience, we are trying to do this through relationships and an equity lens. If we are asking for people to volunteer, then we are recruiting a very particular type of lived experience. And we are not really dealing with the inequities of volunteer work and those that can make this a part of their day job. So just today, my equity committee members sent out a message across to the Food Policy Council network that goes out to everyone across the US asking about some of these issues and who's having the same experiences. And we are trading notes with the Pittsburgh Food Policy Council right now, trying to figure out what stipends can look like for council members, what paid membership might look like, so that we can really focus on the equity issue internally again. Not just have volunteers who have the capacity and time to volunteer, but really thinking about how can we connect with those who have the sort of expertise, but cannot just add one more thing to their plate. Sorry, Barbara, that's a sort of
no. I mean,
response.
I'm fine with that. I mean, it's fine that you explain it that way. So is what I'm hearing is that you're working for more diversity on the food council, or do you have it already, or is that what your goal is?
So to just put it in really clear numbers, 3 of the members that rolled off in 2020 were 3 African-American women that represented the food access side of our council. And it's unfortunate that all 3 of them were due to roll off in the same year. So there's a lived experience side of that, which sector you represent, and the relationships with community that you bring to the food council, right? So really thinking about that deeply. So the new member that we proposed and asked to come on board fills in some of those gaps around lived experience, connection to communities, food access. And we have done better over the years of having more lived experience, in particular in our leadership. So So who's guiding the conversations and some of those decision-making processes? But we have decided at this time to just take a step back from filling the 2 other seats and really thinking about what barriers we've created to achieving the goals we say we want, right? So if we say we want a center lived experience, if we say that we want more diversity of lived experience and a focus on food insecurity and a knowledge of that firsthand, then how are we making that possible? That's where we're at right now. We're looking at like the possibility of stipends, of changing the way we meet, how we meet, and how we build those relationships.
That, that is so excellent, because what I'm hearing is a lot of awareness around what needs to be done with the process, and that, that's a beginning, and I appreciate that. So thank you.
It is just the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
We're working on it.
Thanks, Barbara. Good comments brought up there. Let's see, Sammy, and then Damon, and then maybe we can go toward winding down this item. Sammy.
I just want to point out the fact that like in the town, in the county, and Chapel Hill, through the GARE process, we're all learning how to do this better. And I think the experience, and because we started off so early as a food council, there are a lot of lessons learned that hopefully will be communicated through the GARE process that we've been experimenting with, that can be transferable to other arenas of, like, for example, our advisory boards in town. So I look forward to having that be another added value of what this food council represents as a means for addressing systemic issues such as racism. And so I'm glad it's coming through, and that y'all are hearing this, because I think it's super valuable, especially in this time.
Thanks, Sammy. I agree. Damon?
Yeah, thanks, Sammy, for making that point. I think it's really important, and it's exactly why GARE focuses on creating these learning cohorts, so that we are learning how systems can work together better, and people who are making that change happen are learning from each other in the process of doing that. So I appreciate that. Ashley, it's really great to see you back in action. I know that you were missed dearly, and so congratulations, but also welcome back, and I'm glad you're back at work. And I'm just, as I'm hearing you talk about how things have evolved with the Food Council, and then of course moving into the pandemic, which has created a whole new layer to the existing crisis that we already had in food systems here locally. It just makes me so grateful to remember back several years ago when we were going through that process of figuring out what the Food Council could look like, and struggling with what is the role of the towns and the county, and how are we going to work together and be a part of that process. So I'm just really thrilled that you are the one in the place where you are and doing this work, because you're the right person for the job. And I'm really thrilled. Also, just want to say that Sammy is representing this council on the Food Council, because I think Sammy is exactly the kind of champion that we need in that role. So thanks to you both.
Thanks, Damon.
Thank you so much.
Good comments, Damon. Everyone, great comments. And yeah, Ashley, I echo all the comments. Thank you for the report, especially the effects on the last year on everyone. So, all right, I think that this was just an update for us to receive from the Food Council. So no need, I don't think, for a motion or anything. We're just accepting the report. So again, thank you, and we'll see you again sometime soon.
Great. Thank you.
Bye,
all
Ashley.
All right. Okay, council members, Mr. Manager, next item. I think we have one more item, and then we go into closed session. So we can't hear you. David? Hey, David, we can't hear you. You just have your microphone muted, it looks like.
If you want, David, if your microphone's looks like you're having some trouble there, we can't hear you, but it's the next item is the last item, Mayor, I believe it.
Okay, do you want to go ahead and take it away, like just introduce it, I guess, Kathy?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, Mr. Manager, we're having trouble hearing you, so Kathy's going to pull it up. I think it's a discussion of a remote legislative delegation meeting, right? And then an adoption of our legislative priorities.
That's right.
For the upcoming session. So
Yeah, that's right. So this was continued from y'all's January 12th meeting, and you've received the information in your packet. The General Assembly is back in session. Nothing extraordinarily happened with the election. Republican control is still there. They would need Democrats to come over for any veto-proof vote. So that's probably unlikely, but not a lot of change in the General Assembly that we're anticipating. The big questions that I have for you tonight are, one, do you want me to try to get your delegation together with y'all to have a virtual meeting? We tried that back in the spring, summer, I think, or maybe it was fall. You know how 2020 does with the time, and it did not work. So we go back and forth. We have 3 delegates that we try to get their calendar and availability, and then try to get, all of you there as well. And we used to have those for breakfast meetings, but the timing didn't work out great. So we switched those to dinner meetings when we were in person. So the timing would likely be after 5 o'clock, probably sometime, 6 o'clock, 6:30, depending upon your schedule. But those are just some things to think about and provide me with direction, a simple yes or no, and then I can kind of do the logistical stuff behind the scenes. And then, of course, for you to take a look at your legislative priorities. Those were brought over, some from last year, and we've added a couple, I believe, moving forward with your work on reparations and racial equity work. We've added bullet point 6 this year, and then bullet point 7. They're not numbered. They're just the last 2 on your list. And that last one was actually added Friday late. I was on the Metro Mayors Coalition call Friday morning, and the North Carolina First Commission has a kind of a statewide lobbying effort to try to get as much support behind this as possible. And it's always a good thing to authorize local option sales tax for any reason, but this will be for transportation purposes, because we all know that DOT and our transportation funding has experienced some shortfalls the past few years, the most severe coinciding with the pandemic, of course. But this would authorize, support counties in creating a local option sales tax that could then be distributed. I don't talk a lot to people anymore. To local governments and as needed for transportation purposes. So let me know if y'all have any questions and if you want to add anything.
Very good, Kathy. Thank you. And I was on that Metro Mayors phone call with you, of course, and Nancy McFarland gave a really good report of the overview of the NC First Commission, and indeed that, I think we would support a local option for a sales tax dealing with that. I think the first thing, Damon, I see your hand up. I think the first thing I wanted to kind of do was see if there was interest in meeting with our delegation. I'll tell you, I think last year was really weird. We could barely even try to get in, all that. We tried it. It was crazy. I think it's a little different now. It's January. This is a long session. We usually meet with them. It's easier than ever to meet on Zoom, and I think what I would suggest is you touch base. There's a kind of a schedule that they usually have. And I don't even know if they're going in person very much, but they used to roll in on Monday and go out on Thursday afternoon. But it would seem to me, if that's the case, maybe a Thursday at 5 or Thursday at 5:30 or 5 or 6, if that schedule is still similar, that might work for them. I don't know, council members. I'd like to hear from others your thoughts on, and maybe just a show of hands, who here thinks we should have Kathy see if she can try to arrange a meeting with them on a night convenient for them. I was kind of thinking a Thursday, but I think Tuesday night's the only night I have anything regular going on other than our advisory board meetings. Jackie, do you have a comment? Or are you saying, yeah?
Just saying, I think we should.
Yeah. And who else thinks we should? I don't, just hand up if you think we should. Sammy, no hand up, but whatever. Okay. So he's like, well, whatever. So Kathy, check it out with them. See if we can. We're not going to, I think it's just always good for us to check in, because, you never know what's going to happen, what's going to get introduced. And that turnaround time for the bills, I think you said was in mid-March or something. So it'd be good to just kind of, touch base with them, I think. All right. That aside, Damon.
Thank you. Kathy, thanks for taking care of the logistics. Also, thank you for representing us in was it the National League of Cities or the North Carolina League of Municipalities advocacy stuff that they were doing for set priorities. And I appreciated you wrangling us around those priorities. I think this list looks good. I know that in the past several years, we've been trying to keep the list shorter than we used to. We used to go in with multiple pages of priorities, right? Which probably wasn't super helpful to anyone. So I appreciate the shortness of this one. One item I did want to raise up for the council's consideration is something that happened back in 2019. We got fixed through some hard work by our legislative delegation, and it's now back happening again. You remember that urban transit systems around the state, including Chapel Hill Transit, rely on what's called the State Maintenance Assistance Program. It's a large amount of funding that goes to urban bus systems around the state. Chapel Hill relies on that program a lot to maintain operations and services, primarily operations. In 2019, the General Assembly reduced that funding by a huge amount, which cut Chapel Hill Transit's budget, but I think something like $700,000 to $800,000 in the single fiscal year, which is a big cut for us. We worked with Verla and the rest of the delegation to get that fixed, and they did fix it. But then, of course, you remember this past year, NCDOT's financial situation went the wrong way. So this year, they've actually, I believe, cut the program completely, which is and we're sort of being held harmless a little bit by the CARES funding, but that shouldn't be how it's done. We need that funding to be in place regardless of whether there's CARES funding available. So I just wanted to suggest that we, once again, as we did in 2019, include in our legislative priorities reinstatement and full restoration of funding to the SMAP program, so that we don't end up in a hole after we're no longer receiving federal rescue funds from the pandemic. So that's a long way of saying, please add SMAP back to the priorities list.
Yeah, thank you, Damon. Thanks for bringing that up. I mean, that's exactly the kind of reason that we want to be touching base with them, so they're aware of things like that.
I just had one other quick note. One other thing we did back in 2019, which seems very timely now, given the economic consequences we're about to reap from this pandemic, is we passed a resolution, you'll recall, in 2019 regarding supporting workers in North Carolina, and particularly thanking our delegation and encouraging them to continue to support legislation around minimum wage increase, supporting the right of workers for collective bargaining purposes, and other support, things like paid leave for workers. Our delegation has always been supportive of that legislation, and some of them have actually co-sponsored bills to that effect. Just wanted to lift up that resolution one more time from 2019 and maybe just share it with them. We don't have to add it to the priorities, but I just wanted to remind them that we did send them that resolution 2 years ago. And this would be another great year to be supporting workers in moving through the disastrous economy we're about to inherit.
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right, great. Thanks, Damon. Okay, who else? I think I saw Barbara and Sammy. Barbara, was your hand up? No, you're just kind of, okay. Did I see yours, Susan? I thought I saw a hand here in the middle. Let's go Sammy and then Susan, okay?
Yeah, I'd like to echo Damon thanking Kathy for all your work on this legislative front with the League of Municipalities and bringing this to us every year. It is unfortunate that the legislators are still so conservative, and I presume that some of the asks here are tempered by that reality. So, for example, point number 2, the broadband, instead of saying like ability to have our broadband, local broadband utilities, municipal broadband utilities, it's a step in that direction. So if we had a different legislature, I would push for that to read differently. I did mention interest last time when we had the OWASA presentation of, because this might be neutral, I don't really know what the politics of it are exactly, but OWASA did an assessment of its different sources for water in 2050 as part of their long-range plan. And one of the ones that ranked highest, except for the fact that it's currently not legal in the state, is direct potable reuse. And so I'd like to include that as something, just at a minimum, to put it on their radar so that we can advance the security of our water and open up potentially a better option than the ones that OWASP is currently constrained and considering.
Sammy, thanks for remembering that. Great. All right, let's see. I think Susan was next.
Yes, I was just going to cheer on what Damon said about raising the minimum wage. So I know everybody knows this already, but minimum wage in North Carolina has been $7.25 an hour for 11 years now. So this is about $15,000 a year. So I would love to lift up this idea of making the minimum wage a living wage, which is closer to 15 an hour. We're hearing more and more about that at the federal government level. But I do want to note that the 15 that's being talked about will be phased in over many years. But I hope that North Carolina can rise up and do the same.
Okay. Thanks, Susan. All right. So I think we're all good with our priorities. All right. And Kathy, so check with them and see what works. I mean, I just kind of threw out Thursday, but I don't know, Monday or Wednesday may be better for them. I don't know. We'll figure out, we kind of need to see what works for the 2 or 3 of them, and then we can fill as many of us around it that we can. So,
Yep.
Okay. All right, very good. All right, so council members, we're at the end of our regular meeting, and so we need a motion.
Mayor, I'm sorry. Is it okay with those additions that y'all read into them, if you could officially adopt these priorities so that I can share them?
Yeah.
We adopt the priorities as amended in this.
Motion by Damon to adopt the priorities as we talked about tonight. Second by Sammy. All in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Susan?
Aye.
Me? Aye. Barbara?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
And then Sammy.
Aye.
Okay, very good. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, so let's entertain a motion to go into closed session.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Barbara, go into closed session for purposes of a personnel matter. Second by Susan. All in favor, say aye. Randy?
Aye.
Damon?
Aye.
Me, aye. Susan?
Aye.
Jackie?
Aye.
Barbara?
Aye.
And Sammy?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. So we'll wait here a second until Kathy knows we're off of everything.